Hello, this is Chaff Commander Coffee, back with my next episode in my 0 AD Empire's Ascendant Overview and Tutorial series. Today, we will be taking a look at the Gauls. So, let's go and set up the game. Gauls, Sandbox AI, and should be the same, yep. Right, let's get straight into it. Okay, so the Gauls are the second team that we are looking at within the Celtic culture group. And I should, somebody did comment in the last video that I did about the quality of the videos. I'm very sorry, as I said in the comment, I did have my OBS set up for Dominions 4. Which isn't quite as graphically intensive, by any stretch of the imagination, as 0 AD. So hopefully in this video, quality should be vastly improved, and you guys can really enjoy the content that I have. I am interested in keeping the quality quite high, so if I can solve that, then all is well. Right, let's just get some basic buildings up so we can advance to the next age. Let's get a barracks up there. We'll train a couple more units just to get building and stuff done a bit faster. Right, and I'll tell you what, we'll also build, let's just build a couple of defense towers. Let's have them go over there. Right, I'll just put the speed up whilst they do that. And go over the civilization bonuses. So, if you did see my Britain's overview, then the Gauls will be very similar, because the Gauls have the same civilization bonuses and team bonuses as the Britons. Now, I can't remember if this applies to all of the Celtic factions. I'm not sure if the Germanians get a different one, so we'll have to see when we come to that. But the Gauls do get the same bonuses, and I will just repeat them just for everyone's quality of life. So the first one is they gain an enhanced amount of food from ranching and farming. Now ranching is from animals from corral, and farming is obviously from farms, like this one. I'll just build one of those to get out of the way. And the second bonus is that druids increase the attack rates of soldiers nearby. And you get druids from the temple, which I will now build, so that we can advance to the next age. And the team bonus is that the Gauls provide a bonus to technology research speed. So, as I said, all the same as the bonuses you receive from the bonuses you receive from the Britons. Let me just get a few more buildings up so we can advance again. Just upgrade those defense towers. Just gonna mark it up and build. We probably should build a tavern. I'll go into the unique buildings of the Gauls when we come to that part of the overview. Let's get these women to help out as well. Right. What the Gauls do differently is their unique technologies. So I'll quickly have to just find those. There we are. So the first unique technology the Gauls get access to is Uewitos. I think I'm pronouncing that right, I'm probably not. So do excuse me there. But the effect of the Gauls' first unique technology is they receive a set amount of ore and food from every structure destroyed or captured. So it's a pretty interesting unique technology. It allows you to recoup some of the resources you will be spending during the game, training units and such, by capturing your opponent's structures and destroying their buildings. So this does have a few advantages in terms of utilizing siege weapons, but the fact that capturing structures also provides a bonus of resources will improve your efficiency whilst raiding your opponent. So if you can get a small group or larger group of cavalry and raid your opponent with those, and you manage to capture some buildings, even if it's something as small as some houses and such, you will still receive a bonus for that. The second unique technology for the Gauls is that Gallic druids gain a small melee attack. So your druids are actually combat units for the Gauls. I will just quickly train one just to show them off. So we can see the druid here. Unless I'm getting that wrong. Right. It says that the druids gain a small melee attack, but what I think it actually means, this is where I'm getting the information from, is the Wikia. What I think that actually means is that the druids increase your unit's melee attack slightly whilst in their AoE. I could be wrong there, but that is what I'm getting the impression of. Oh, we'll build a Rotary Mill as well, just to go over that when the time comes. Right. Yeah, so I believe it's the Gallic druids will gain a small bonus to their melee attack of your units. Again, I could be wrong, I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't look based on the druids' stats that they can actually attack units. So I will have to assume that it is the fact that the druids not only boost the attack speed of your units, but also their damage. So really, just like the other Celt teams, you do want to utilise druids and your healer unit, perhaps more so than other nations. But for the Gauls especially, if their unit's attack damage is going to be improved, then that is certainly something you probably want to focus on getting active as often as possible. So those are the unique technologies and the... I'm not 100% sure where they're probably available from the Tavern. No? Interesting. Oh, it's not telling me where they're available from. So, again, if I can't find where the unique technologies are available from quickly, then you will have to assume that they are available from one of the buildings or just automatically available. Unfortunately, the wiki doesn't say exactly which one is the case, so a little bit of testing and you should be able to figure it out. But those are the different civilization bonuses, team bonus and unique technologies for the Gauls. Now we'll go over to the Gauls unit roster. I'll just quickly split off some units. So we have a skirmisher there, we have a spearman over there as well. We'll take the druid, why not, since they are a little bit more important. And just have all of these workers, I'm not sure. They can just build a storehouse and mine some stone, I suppose. Right, so, from our town centre, the Gauls get access to the basic villager, of course, a spearman unit, a citizen soldier spearman, a citizen soldier skirmisher, and a raiding cavalry, the cavalry skirmisher, which is a javelin armed cavalryman. Citizen cavalrymen. From their barracks in Age 2, I believe, yeah, it should be Age 2, they will gain access to the Celtic slinger, which is your basic citizen soldier slinger, and your cavalry swordsman, which are your basic citizen soldier swordsman cavalry. But the Gauls do gain access to a special building, which does include some of their units. So I'll quickly just tag up some units to be trained there. And it is the Tavern here. Now I'll go into the Tavern in more detail, but the unit available from the Tavern is the Gauls, the Naked Fanatic. This is a champion spear unit that is available from Phase 2. So, just like the Athenians, who have access to the Thracian Black Cloaks in Age 2, as opposed to just Age 3, where most teams get access to their champion units, the Gauls get access to the Gauls in Age 2. Now, they have the same damage and attack rate as standard champion spearmen, as we saw with the city guard for Athens. However, their armor is much lower. To compensate for this, the Gaysata are incredibly fast. As you can see, for a standard, I'll just line one up with a, well, I mean, you can probably see from there, but I'll line a spearman up and the Gaysata and just have them move over here. As you can see, the Gaysata is incredibly quick compared to a standard spearman unit. What this means, and coupled with the ability to train Gaysata or the Naked Fanatics in the second phase, is that you have a incredibly strong melee-based raiding unit. Now, I've seen a video of Burke using Naked Fanatics incredibly well as early game raiding units. Now, they are particularly expensive for a champion with 100 wood and 150 metal. But given the ability to access them very early on, and their speed, as well as their damage being very strong as well, they do make incredibly powerful raiding units. And because they are spearmen, they still retain 3 times damage bonus versus cavalry, which can make them incredibly difficult to catch when they try to raid you. Due to their speed, the only real counter to a Naked Fanatic rush is to mass up a decent number of ranged units, because your basic citizen soldiers like your spearmen will get torn apart by these guys. Even though the citizen soldiers will have just slightly more armor than the Naked Fanatic, they have half the damage and a lot less hit points. So the Naked Fanatics will be able to tear through citizen soldiers without too many issues. So the only real counter to them, and you can't use cavalry, even though you would probably want to because of the speed of the Naked Fanatics, it will be very hard to catch them whilst they are raiding you, is that cavalry will die very, very quickly to Naked Fanatics. They will kill them incredibly fast. So you can't really use cavalry to stop Naked Fanatics raiding you, and you can't use melee infantry. So your only real option to counter a Naked Fanatic rush is to utilize a large number of ranged units. Now, the problem with that is that, if I just pull over the slinger here as well, you can see the Naked Fanatic completely outpaces your ranged units as well. I think the Javelineers are your fastest citizen soldier ranged unit, and even then, the Gaysata or the Naked Fanatic is faster. So even if you are going to use citizen range units to fight off the Naked Fanatics, you're still going to take quite a lot of casualties, because the Gaysata, they can just catch up with them. No issue at all. So the Naked Fanatics are a very, very powerful unit available to the Gauls. The only thing that really lets them down is their armor value in the late game. You will have to replace, once you hit phase 3, it's still better to train your standard champion units, simply because of the cost of them, and their actual armor values will be much better as well. But the Naked Fanatics still do have a niche use in the late game, in that they are still spearman units. So if you need a particularly fast spearman unit to catch, say your opponent is utilizing quite a lot of champion cavalry, the Naked Fanatic might still be a good unit to purchase. But in general, you will find players use the Naked Fanatics in small groups, between say 2 and 4 Naked Fanatics, because that's really all you need, is literally just 2 or 4 of these guys, and they can completely mess up your opponent's economy in the early game when they don't have the defenses set up necessary to fight them off. One of the other strategies I've seen work quite well against the Gauls is to simply put defense towers close to where you are gathering resources. On this map it's not quite so simple because the wood is very spread out. But in a map where your wood line is a lot more dense, you simply put a defense tower by your wood line, and then garrison, and then maybe even put some houses near your wood line, so your women can garrison the houses and your men can garrison the towers. And the Naked Fanatics, although they are champions and can capture buildings quite quickly, they have the same capture rate as other champion units. They won't do near as well trying to fight under defense towers as other champions because of that low armor value. So those are the Naked Fanatics. I really like them. I may post a link to the video where Borg, probably the best 0 AD player currently in the community, uses the Naked Fanatics in a Naked Fanatic rush incredibly well. I believe Alakusu commentated that particular game. It might have been Amphibian Hoplite. Hello, by the way, if you're watching this video. I did respond to your comment. As I said in the comment, I got into 0 AD originally from Amphibian Hoplite and Alakusu's videos. So if you're trying to look for someone else who does 0 AD videos, I highly recommend you check out those channels. You should be able to find them on the 0 AD forums, if not a quick search on YouTube. So yeah, that's just there. And we will go on to our next units for the Gauls. So we have access to the Battering Ram. I believe all the Celtic teams only have access to the Battering Ram, which obviously I have no problem with, since I really do like the Battering Ram. But just to point that out, they are lacking in ranged siege weapons. The two champion units that the Gauls get access to, I will just speed it up whilst I train them. We have the Gallic Noble Cavalry, which are champion lancers. So much like the champion lancers that we saw in my Carthaginian overview, the Sacred Band at the start, the Gallic Noble Cavalry act as your really late game powerful shock cavalry. They will have the same stats as I said in my, I think it was my Britons overview, where I talked about how a unit of the same class will have the same stats as a unit from another civilization. It doesn't matter which civilization they're from, they will have the same stats. Unless it's a very unique unit like the Naked Fanatic. Right, so that's those two trained. So let's take a look-see. So yeah, we have our Gallic Noble Cavalry here, and we also have the Solduros, which is the Gallic Champion Swordsman. So this is our first Champion Swordsman we've had a look at in this particular series, so I will just go over their stats. They have a close quarter attack of 11 hack, which I think is just under double the hack damage of a Citizen Swordsman. But they have an attack rate of every 0.75 seconds. It may be the same rates of attack and damage as the Thracian Black Cloaks. Can't remember off the top of my head. Regardless, they have 11 hack and attack rate of 0.75 seconds. A capture attack of 5, the same as other champions, and an armor rating of 7 hack and 7 pierce. Now, some of you might think to yourselves, now why would I train the swordsman over the spearmen, since the swordsmen don't have a bonus versus cavalry? So you might be thinking, stat-wise, they're not that much better than champion spearmen. Well, the real advantage of champion swordsmen is their attack rate. Now, in a 1v1 fight, you will find that the champion swordsman will win every time against champion spearmen, and that's simply due to their faster attack rate. So champion swordsmen really are your, just like the Brythonic swordsman from the Britons, the long swordsman, they really are your anti-melee units. They will perform best out of any melee unit in the game, will be your champion swordsman. There are a few teams that get a bonus to their swordsmen, and you need to keep an eye out for them. It's the Iberians and the Mauryan. They get a unique upgrade, which makes their swordsmen particularly powerful. And in a matchup against those civilizations, if they get enough champion swordsmen, you will not win a melee. You just won't. It's pretty much impossible without using a large number of cavalry. But with the Gauls, I'll go over the heroes and buildings before I talk about their roster as a whole and some of the weaknesses and such about it. But this is their full roster. So you've got the Javelin Cavalry, Sword Cavalry, Lance Cavalry, so you get a nice mix of cavalry. You get Javelins and Slings, Basic Citizen Spearmen, your Naked Fanatic Champion Spearmen, and your Soldier-ass Champion Swordsman. Okay. The 3 heroes we have access to, the first one is Brennus. Brennus has his special ability is plus 15 metal looted for every enemy unit killed within 60 meters of him. So Brennus is an incredibly powerful hero simply because metal is one of the most important resources for late game technologies and for training champion units. Basic citizen units, aside from swordsmen, will not cost metal, and that includes swordsman cavalry as well. But your mercenary units and your champion units, so in Gaul's case, the Naked Fanatics and the other champion units they have access to, do cost quite a lot of metal, and the Battering Rams as well. Yeah, 200 metal. So they all cost quite a lot of metal, as well as your upgrades. So what Brennus does is, whenever you, coupled with the Gaul's ability to loot more ore and food from capturing or destroying buildings, Brennus really augments your ability to trade with your opponent. So if you get forced into an open engagement where there's a lot of units involved and the casualties are going to be quite high, Brennus will mean that you nearly always come out on top, even if you lose the fight. And the reason for this is because for all that extra metal you're gaining for killing their units, you are putting yourself one step ahead in terms of economy and fielding your more professional champion soldiers. So Brennus, and because Brennus has this where he needs to be near your units for this ability to trigger, it's really a good idea for Gaul players who take Brennus as their chosen hero to really focus on forcing those large engagements, because you will always come out on top, regardless of the casualties sustained, simply because the amount of resources you're losing in proportion to your opponent for units killed should be in your favour because of all the extra metal you're gaining. Brennus is a soldier. He's an infantry swordsman, so he's better to keep around with your other infantry as opposed to cavalry, because he won't be able to keep up with them. So really, Brennus is someone you want to be combining with not so much the Naked Fanatics. Now, the thing, because the Naked Fanatics are so fast, someone like Brennus won't be able to keep up with them. So really, Brennus is going to be your main hero if you're using a lot of Solduros or Citizen Spearmen. Right, the next hero we have Britta Martes. His ability is he improves your gathering rate of all resources, since it hasn't specified. So all of your gathering rates are increased by 15% during his lifetime. So whilst he's on the field, you get 15% faster gather rate on everything. Now, with the Celtic ability to gather food faster, that will include food as well, and that is a global bonus. So if you like playing a boom game with the Gauls, then Britta Martes really is the only choice for you. Now, it doesn't improve the amount of resources you're gathering, but simply how fast you gather them. So in a situation where you get into a large engagement and you find you lose more units than your opponent, Britta Martes can be useful as well for really getting your economy back on track. He's also probably one of the better heroes to go for if you find yourself being raided early on. and you take quite a lot of casualties or not very many good trades during those early raids, then Britta Martes can be the hero to focus on, just to put your economy back on track, and once it is, you can swap him out for a bit more of a proactive hero. But if you really want to play the long boom game, then Britta Martes is perfect, since if you consider his bonus to gathering rate with, say, the economy technologies, the Iron Plough increases farming rate by 15%. If we take a look at the storehouse, we have 15% lumbering rate on trees, 15% stone gathering, 15% metal gathering. He is effectively an extra economic upgrade in every single field. So for his cost, yeah, he's very efficient. He is a very efficient hero for boosting your economy. And his soldier type is he is a spear infantryman. So again, going with the idea that he's probably an anti-raid hero. He's very good at playing defensively, since he counters cavalry. So yeah, Britta Martes more of a defensive hero. And our final hero is Vercingetorix. He is a cavalry swordsman, and his special ability is 20% attack and +1 capture for soldiers and siege engines within 60 meters of him. So Vercingetorix really is your prime offensive character. The difference between him being an offensive character and Brennus is that Brennus likes large engagements. Now that means trying to draw your opponent's army out of defensive locations, for example their base or any fortified outposts they have. Whereas Vercingetorix is perfectly fine with rolling straight into your opponent's base with a number of siege weapons and your whole army and just laying waste to the place. So he really is your prime sort of siege character, and really when you want to push for victory over your opponent, then Vercingetorix is your go-to hero. The capture rate is particularly useful for the Gauls, given they gain bonus resources when capturing buildings. But the attack is also, on the other side of the coin, very useful, because your Battering Rams will be able to knock buildings down faster. So depending on whether, I think it would depend on whether you were attacking an expansion or your opponent's main base. If you're attacking an expansion, you generally want to capture it, but if you're attacking your opponent's main base, you probably just want to knock as much as you can to the ground. Simply because if you're destroying your opponent's main base, they're going to find, since that will be the most developed part of their economy on the map, or generally speaking, you will be doing the most damage by simply destroying the buildings. If you capture them and then you have to pull back, they'll get those buildings back unless you make sure to delete them. So yeah. Whereas if you're attacking an expansion, it's probably better to capture it, because then you can utilize that expansion as your next front line for recruiting new units and also denying resources closer to your opponent's base. So those are the three heroes, the champion units, and the rest of the lineup for the Gauls. So let's talk about some of the Gauls buildings. Now, we have the standard buildings, as well as the Celtic civilization bonus that you gain population from certain buildings inside of your, well, certain non-house buildings. For example, your storehouse, your farmstead, your docks, your barracks, your blacksmith, your temple. These all provide population just like a house. As I said in my Britons overview, this has numerous advantages. I won't go into them again for the sake of repeating myself, but if you are interested, go check out the Britons overview in this series. The unique buildings for the Gauls, we do have the Rotary Mill, which I did show in my Britons overview as well. I wasn't sure if the other Celts got access to the Rotary Mill, but it looks like the Gauls do.
Yes,
which improves the gather rate for workers in farms by 25%. So this, coupled with the Celts' ability to farm faster, and then something like Britta Martes, means you could be gaining more food than even the Britons, which is... I mean, there's a limit to how much food you actually need, but in team games, what you can do by going very heavily into food is that your other allies, especially with the Gauls who get Britta Martes, if you're playing a boom pocket Gauls in a team game, you can do all of the food gathering with the same number of workers for you and another teammate. Like, you would gather food that fast, I'm not joking. You could literally gather all the food you would need and your ally would need. And if you were in, say, a 200 pop 3v3, if the Gauls decided to go 60 women onto farms, which is it really is quite a lot of farmers, you normally wouldn't need those many. In a 3v3, you'd probably only need about 30. So if you got double the standard number of farmers, you could feed not only yourself, but both of your allies as well, which means they wouldn't need anyone gathering food. Now, they probably would still have people gathering food, but certainly a much smaller number, allowing you to levy more soldiers on the flanks of the map, as opposed to the pocket, which is again more suited for a defensive playstyle. So, the Rotary Mill there, another bonus for Gauls, but the real unique building the Gauls have access to is the Tavern. Now, the Tavern is available in Age 2. It contains all of the upgrades that you will see in a standard house. I'll quickly just build a house. For those of you that watched my Athenians Let's Play, or overview rather, you will know what the technologies here available in the house are. We've got the loom, the home garden, and fertility festival. All of these upgrades are available from the Tavern as well. The Tavern has a population bonus of 10. So, whilst it is 100 stone and 100 wood, compared to the house, the Tavern does provide twice the population bonus, and I believe, unlike the house, you should be able to garrison... you can't. Interesting. I was going to say you probably should be able to garrison soldiers inside of it, but it looks like you can still only garrison women inside of it, so there you go. But you have an alternative source of population cap. It looks like the sandbox AI is hunting inside my lands. Let's just get rid of them. Silly AI. Right, yeah, so the Tavern can act as an alternative source of housing, and a more bulk source of housing compared to your standard houses. One of the sort of strategies you could implement by using a lot of taverns instead of regular houses is you split your cost to build them between wood and stone. So if you're not planning on building very many slingers, then you can use that stone to build A, fortresses, and then B, taverns. Since the Celtic temples and barracks cost only wood as opposed to stone, that's probably something I should have mentioned earlier on in my overviews. Certain nations do have different building costs for buildings. The Celtic teams generally require just wood. So their barracks only cost wood, their temple only cost wood. Whereas things like the teams like the Carthaginians, the Romans, and the Greek teams, they will either split their cost between stone and wood for things like barracks, or they will cost just stone. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but I only just remembered, so very sorry about that if any of you were confused. But yeah, so the advantage of the Tavern is another sort of sink for your stone surplus, And if you build these around your base instead of houses, since they can garrison women just like a normal house. Say you have some outlying fields, so if we had a farmstead over here because, I don't know, there were some berries, or we wanted to hunt the elephants, and we wanted to hunt them a little bit faster, we may build a farmstead here so we have a quicker drop-off point. Now once those elephants are hunted and we don't have enough space to build farms around our town centre, say we put a farm, or we'll have to get some more wood. Oh, they decided to go and attack the elephants. No, don't attack the elephants, they'll kill you. Silly workers. Right. Say we had not enough space for farms, so we can't build any more farms around our town centre. What we could do is we build the farms around the farmstead here, once we kill off all the elephants and we've hunted all of them. And say we build a Rotary Mill just there. Now what we could do, instead of building houses to protect the women working on these farms, is build taverns. So we could build a couple of taverns around here. What those taverns will do is, if we do get raided, we can quickly utilise our store of metal to rally up a number of Naked Fanatics. And since the most common unit you will be raided by is Cavalry, you'll find... I'll just quickly get rid of this elephant before it tries to kill all of our villagers. There we are. Oh, I think this elephant wants to come kill our villagers as well. That's a bit unfortunate. Elephants are pretty tough, as you can see, so before you think that hunting elephants is an easy thing, yeah, think again. They will kill your units. Generally you want to use cavalry to do that. Anyway, yeah, so if you get raided by a large number of cavalry, say you're playing against Macedon or Rome, those are two of the teams you generally see cavalry rushes on a bit more regularly. Then building taverns around your outlying farmland is probably a better idea than building houses. You can build some houses as well, just to make sure you have the garrison limit, but building 1 or 2 taverns is not a bad idea, so that you can train those Naked Fanatics straight on top of the raiding force. And they will, as I said, they will absolutely cut through cavalry with no issues at all. So that's one of the sort of little strategic advantages of using taverns. Right, that should be all of the unique buildings and such for the Gauls. Let's now talk about some strategies. Now, I did already say that there was a very powerful Naked Fanatic rush strategy. Given their speed, the fact they cost no food, you can go very heavy into mining and woodcutting early on in the game, and still get plenty of Naked Fanatics. Because taverns also act as part of your population cap, by building more taverns, you are inadvertently improving your population cap and allowing you to access more buildings to train more Naked Fanatics faster. So I will, probably what I will do is I will find that video of Burke doing a sort of top tier Naked Fanatic rush in a game. I believe Alakusu did the commentary for that, as I said, and I will post the link for that with this overview, because it is probably the best example of that strategy that you will see currently online. I don't think anyone else has done a better example of it, or a better sort of implementation of that strategy, so I may as well post it up so you guys get to see that, because it is really, really powerful. Do not underestimate these guys. The Gauls will mess you up. They really will. They do not need cavalry to do that in the early game. So, yeah, that's sort of the core strategy that I don't need to go into so much, because you will be able to see it for yourself in play. What we do need to talk about is where the Gauls lack. So, they have... Well, the funny thing is, the Gauls actually have access to every single kind of cavalry. They have a champion lancer, so they have lancer cavalry, they have sword cavalry, and they have javelin cavalry. They don't have horse archers, but as long as you have one type of ranged cavalry, you kind of cover that group of units. So the Gauls really do have a pretty solid access to cavalry. Now, as I said in my Britain's overview, with the faster rate for gathering food and the majority of the cost of resources on cavalry being food, a cavalry-heavy strategy with the Gauls is not a bad idea. As far as your infantry go, you are quite limited. You've got the slingers, your javeliniers, and your basic spearmen. Those are your citizen soldiers. Because the Naked Fanatics are champions, they can't gather resources, and neither can the Soldaros. So really, you only have these 3 core units here as your economy and your bulk fighting force. And as far as that goes, it's not bad. You can easily be outranged by other nations who have access to archers, and you have no swordsmen. You have no citizen swordsmen, so your melee line is going to be a bit weaker as well. So if I had to say your best units for the Gauls in terms of your early game, the slingers and the spearmen will make more of your defensive force. The javeliniers are probably your better units to take with the Naked Fanatics because of their speed being a lot more comparable, as you can see there. The javeliniers will more or less keep up with the Naked Fanatics, whereas your other units they don't have a chance. The Naked Fanatics will completely outrun. So if you had to use a unit to go with your Naked Fanatics to support them on a raid, I would suggest either the Javelin Cavalry or the actual Javelin Infantry. As you can see, the Naked Fanatic isn't that much slower than an actual cavalry man, as you can see. They are a bit slower, but not by much, so yeah. They are fast guys. They are really fast. Right. So if I had to say the Gauls were lacking anywhere, it would be until phase 3, they lack very powerful frontline infantry. They also don't have any ranged siege weapons, and their ranged units can generally, again, they can be beaten at range by archers. So you do need to keep in mind that you might find it difficult to fight armies of large amounts of archers. But you do have solid access to cavalry, so you should be able to counter that with correct positioning. As far as, I think, again, you do have champion lancers, and you do have champion spearmen, although they are particularly expensive. So you shouldn't have too many issues dealing with your opponent's cavalry as the Gauls. As an overall summary of the Gauls, I would say they're one of the more balanced teams. This particular roster here, you've got your champion spearmen, even though they are a mercenary. You have your champion swordsmen for your front line. You've got your champion lancers for that real late game power. And you have sword cavalry, javelin cavalry, so you've got your ranged cavalry, you've got your close range cavalry in your citizens. And you've got a solid mix of both defensive citizen infantry and offensive citizen infantry. So the Gauls really are quite well balanced. They don't really excel in any particular field. If I had to say their weakest thing, it would be ranged combat. But given that the druids boost your men that they're close to in terms of their attack rate and their damage, the Gauls really do want to play quite a heavy melee game. You want to be forcing those engagements and really stopping your opponent from skirmishing around you, and you should be able to do that with your mix of cavalry. As far as overarching strategies go, we've already discussed the sort of boom strategy surrounding Britta Martes, the Naked Fanatic Rush, which I will post up the video for that, as well as the wiki page for Gauls for your further reading. As far as offensive strategies go, I would honestly... Generally, I would go for Brennus, but that's only because I personally find the ability to loot metal per kill to be so powerful for keeping your army at its absolute max efficiency. But do not discount Vercingetorix, because if you are going to be going on a mass offensive and your opponent is going to sit inside of his base, Vercingetorix is definitely the one hero that you would preference in that particular situation. But in keeping with the idea of being very melee focused, the Battering Rams are a great boon in that respect, because, a little tip, if you find you commit to a Naked Fanatic rush, and you don't quite get your opponent to tap out, say it doesn't go quite as well as you'd hoped, and you have, say, 10 or 20 Naked Fanatics milling around your base, fighting off cavalry, but you decide to go on a mass offensive on your opponent's main base. These guys will get torn apart by archers. They don't have as much HP as a standard champion unit, and they don't have near as much armor as even your citizen soldiers. So they will get killed fairly quickly by a lot of ranged units. Or just in general, large masses of units they won't perform quite as well against. The best way to use your Naked Fanatics that you have left over from a rush is to build Battering Rams. Rather than hiding Solduros inside your Battering Rams, hide your Naked Fanatics inside them. This way, if your opponent flanks your Battering Rams with cavalry, the Naked Fanatics will have no issue getting rid of those. And if your opponent does decide to try and get some infantry on top of your Battering Rams, the Naked Fanatics will be able to immediately engage in melee combat without having to worry about any sort of harassment ranged fire coming from archers or slingers or some such, really cutting their HP down and thus their combat effectiveness before the melee starts. So if you find you have a lot of these guys left over, Battering Rams are perfect for utilising your Naked Fanatics in the late game. Oh, just having a lovely swig of tea. Really, so I don't lose my voice when I'm doing these commentaries today. Right, other than that, I will talk a bit more about Brennus. He's the hero I've probably had a bit more practice with. So I've talked a lot about trying to force your opponent into an open battle. The best way to do this, I've found, is really the Gauls need to they need to make themselves appear to be in a bad situation or in a bad position. So what you want to do is, really with the Gauls, if you expand towards your opponent, but don't build too many defences around your expansion, which may sound odd, but really this is one of the best ways to bait your opponent into attacking you. Generally, your opponent will not want you to gobble up larger sections of the map with your regional borders. Obviously, by building a town centre, you will get a new set of borders to work with. And if you claim some of the more important resources, such as a large stone or metal deposit, depending on the map, certain maps will be very stone low or metal low. If you can grab one of those vital deposits on the map with an expansion, I would recommend not building those many defences. And again, the reason being is to try to bait your opponent into an open attack. Now, if you have, say, about 20 units gathering from that deposit, and then once your opponent arrives to try to remove your base, you garrison them inside the town centre, and then have your main force, which has been building up behind your lines, outside of your opponent's sort of vision, so they don't know quite how many units you have. You then march them in whilst your opponent is currently raiding your expansion. You get your cavalry to flank around them so that they have no real way to escape, and then you pop your men out of your town centre when your main force arrives with Brennus, and you sandwich your opponent inside your own base. And I find that really is the best way to force an open engagement. They can't retreat because your cavalry are behind them. They can't push forward because you've got Brennus and his massive infantry marching towards them. So they really are stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Especially if their archers or their slingers are hanging further back of their infantry which are attacking your base, then your cavalry should be able to cut through them with practically no issues, especially if you're using your champion lancers. And then your main force of soldiers and spearmen and javelineers can just engage from the front. Naked Fanatics in this particular scenario, if you're trying to force open engagements, they're still not a bad unit to use. Generally speaking, you'll want to have your Naked Fanatics on a control group, say control group 1 or 2 or whatever you prefer, and have, say, 10 or 20 Naked Fanatics just milling around your army, just around the back, just so they stay out of your opponent's ranged fire. And then when your opponent, if your opponent decides to commit cavalry against either your ranged units or your melee line, you can quickly run the Naked Fanatics in, and they will deal with those cavalry without too many problems. So really, if you're not using the Naked Fanatics for a aggressive strategy, you want to use them as a reactive unit. You want to react to your opponent's plays using the Naked Fanatics because their speed enables them to do that and lock down certain parts of your army so that they cannot be attacked by cavalry. And because you want to force your opponent to commit, you want your Naked Fanatics like sort of milling around the back. You will take a few casualties. Like if you're baiting your opponent into engaging you, you may have to use a few units as sort of a sacrificial force to make them think they have the upper hand, and then engage them when they're not ready. But that requires, again, it will require a bit more practice. It also depends on reading your opponent. Depending on what civilization your opponent is playing can kind of give you an idea of when they will commit. So for example, if you're playing against Sparta and they decide to get a lot of Skiritai commandos, which are, I'll have to go into that during my overview, but for those of you that are looking for more advanced tips with the Gauls in particular, if you're, say, playing against Sparta, which has Skiritai commandos, or you're playing against, say, the Persians. So with Skiritai commandos, what they will often do is mass quite a lot of them, and once they feel they have a critical mass of Skiritai, they will push towards your base. What the Gauls can do is sort of see that their opponent is Sparta, and early on in the game, raid with a few Naked Fanatics, maybe a few Javelineers, and build up a force of cavalry in the back, because Skiritai are sword units, they have no bonus versus cavalry. And if you build up a large enough mass of cavalry outside of your Spartan opponent's vision, they will commit their Skiritai far too deep into the map, and they won't be able to escape once your cavalry engage them, because they won't be able to get back to their base in time. The cavalry will simply outrun them. And if you're playing against a Persia, what Persia will generally do is try to hit pop cap and then throw as much as they can at you, because Persia is quite quick to hit pop cap. Now, the way that works in terms of Gauls' favour is that your Naked Fanatics are incredibly powerful for the time that they hit. So if you decide to use them as more of a defensive unit, you can sort of replace cavalry with them in terms of flanking your opponent's ranged units. But you do have to be very careful if you do use them for that, because they do have very low armor values. But yeah, those are just a few thoughts to keep in mind when you try and practice the Gauls and play the Gauls against certain civilization comps. But my overall feelings with the Gauls is that they have a particularly strong aggressive rush. They have quite a balanced unit roster, even though they lack in ranged units. And their main sort of advantage is their economy is quite powerful. but they favour an offensive playstyle. They do like to be on the attack, more so than, say, teams like Carthage, for example, or Athens. The Gauls generally do prefer to be on the attack. A lot of the, in fact, all of the Celtic teams generally prefer to be on the offense. It just depends on how they handle that offense. The Gauls are probably one of the teams that focuses on raiding a lot more than the other Celts. It's not that the other Celts don't raid. Obviously, the Britons can use their war dogs, and I believe the Germanians have... can't remember. We'll get to that when we do the overview for them, but since I've already done my Britons overview, I will talk about them a bit. You've got your war dogs for raiding. The Gauls have got their variety of cavalry in the Naked Fanatics, so your raiding potential is quite high with the Celtic teams. Alright.
Yeah,
I think that should be everything for the Gauls. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed the video, and as I said in this series, I will be posting a link to the wiki page, but in particular with this video, since there is such a good example of one of the strategies I've spoken about, I will post the link to that video as well in the description. Do go check it out, and when you do, you will be able to find Alakusu's YouTube page, or Amphibian Hoplites. I think it was Alakusu that did the Naked Fanatic Borg game, so you'll get to his page immediately. But do check out Amphibian Hoplite as well, because I originally got into Zero AD checking out both those YouTubers' Zero AD videos. They are really good for getting... until I start doing multiplayer commentaries and games, those two particular players have a lot more multiplayer commentaries on their channel. So if you are looking for multiplayer commentaries and you're thinking, when is Chaff going to actually get around to doing that? To sate your appetite, there are plenty of people who already do them. Okay? So, it's been me, Chaff Commander Coffee. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. I can't remember which team is next, so we'll leave that as a surprise. Goodbye.